The morning rush at Celestial Cafe moved like a perfectly choreographed dance until Camila Rosewood appeared behind the counter. Her dark hair escaped from its messy bun as she juggled 3 different orders while mentally calculating if her tips today might finally cover next month's rent. The designer coffee shop in Manhattan's financial district attracted the city's elite.
Oh,
And most days, Camila felt like she was serving aliens from another planet. Double espresso, no foam, extra hot, she called out, sliding the cup across the marble counter to a woman whose handbag probably cost more than Camila's yearly salary. The customer didn't even acknowledge her existence before disappearing into the sea of expensive suits. Flooding the morning rush, Camila had been working double shifts for 3 months now, ever since her graphic design freelance work dried up. Her art degree from a community college didn't exactly open doors in New York's competitive creative industry. Most clients wanted experience she couldn't afford to gain, leaving her stuck in an endless cycle of rejection and financial stress. Cam. Table 7 needs attention, Luna Martinez called from behind the pastry display. Her best friend had been covering extra shifts to help Camila keep up with bills, even though Luna's own photography career was just starting to take off. The loyalty meant everything to Camila, especially when everything else in her life seemed to be falling apart. Table 7 held an elderly gentleman with kind eyes and weathered hands. Wrapped around a simple black coffee, he reminded Camila of her grandfather, the one person who had always believed in her artistic dreams. She approached with genuine warmth, refilling his cup without being asked. "Thank you, dear," he said softly. "My late wife used to make coffee. This good? Haven't tasted anything like it since she passed." Camila's heart squeezed at the loneliness in his voice. "Would you like me to add a touch of cinnamon? Sometimes that makes it taste more like home." His face lit up with gratitude as she sprinkled the spice into his cup. These small moments of human connection made the exhausting work bearable. Camila believed everyone deserved kindness, regardless of their bank account or social status. The cafe's atmosphere shifted suddenly as a commotion erupted near the entrance. A tall figure in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit stood arguing with the elderly gentleman from Table 7, who had apparently bumped into him while leaving. Camila recognized the newcomer immediately. Jonathan Pierce, CEO of Pierce Innovations, whose face graced business magazine covers and whose company's headquarters cast shadows over half the financial district. "Watch where you're going, old man," Jonathan's voice cut through the morning. Chatter like a blade. "This suit costs more than most people make in a month." The elderly gentleman mumbled an apology, clearly embarrassed, clutching his worn jacket tighter around his frail frame. Other customers turned to stare, some pulling out phones to record what looked like it might become social media content. Jonathan seemed completely oblivious to the growing audience. Focused entirely on inspecting his sleeve for any sign of damage, something inside Camila snapped. She had watched entitled customers treat service workers poorly every day, but this crossed a line she couldn't ignore. Before her rational mind could stop her, she was striding across the cafe floor, her heart pounding with righteous anger. "Excuse me," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That man is someone's grandfather. He's a human being who deserves basic respect, not a punching bag for your bad morning." Jonathan turned toward her with a slow, deliberate movement of someone unaccustomed to being challenged. Steel gray eyes swept over her coffee-stained apron and tired face with the kind of casual dismissal that made Camila's blood boil. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" His tone suggested that knowing her would be somewhere between impossible and insulting. "No, but I know exactly what kind of person you are," Camila shot back, her voice gaining strength with each word. "We're the type who thinks money gives you the right to treat other people like they're invisible. That poor man probably worked harder in one day than you have in your entire privileged life." The cafe had gone completely silent. Customers held their breath, waiting to see how the infamous Jonathan Pierce would handle being publicly dressed down by a coffee shop employee. Even the espresso machine seemed to pause its hissing in anticipation. Jonathan's expression remained unreadable as he studied Camila's flushed face. "And what type of person does that make you?" "Someone who assumes she knows everything about a stranger based on a 30-second interaction. It makes me someone who recognizes a bully when she sees one," Camila replied without missing a beat. "Someone who believes that how you treat people who can't do anything for you reveals who you really are." And right now, you're showing everyone in here that underneath that expensive suit is someone with no heart at all." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Camila could feel her coworkers' panic radiating from behind the counter. Luna was probably already updating her resume, assuming they'd both be fired before lunch. But Camila couldn't bring herself to care about consequences when witnessing such casual cruelty. Something unexpected happened then. Instead of exploding with anger or threatening to have her fired, Jonathan Pierce went completely still. Eyes stayed locked on Camila's face, searching for something she couldn't identify. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, broken only by the nervous shuffling of other customers. "You're absolutely right," he said quietly. The admission hit the cafe like a physical force. Several people audibly gasped. Phone clattered to the floor. Camila herself felt her anger deflate into confusion, placed by suspicion that this was some kind of elaborate joke. Jonathan turned toward the elderly gentleman, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Sir, I apologize. There's no excuse for my behavior. Please allow me to replace your coffee and anything else you'd like." The old man looked stunned, but nodded slowly. Jonathan guided him back to table 7, pulling out the chair with genuine care. He then approached the counter and addressed Luna directly. "I'd like to buy coffee and pastries for everyone here this morning," he announced. "And I'd like to speak with your manager about ensuring your staff receives proper recognition for their service." Camila stood frozen in the middle of the cafe floor, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't how powerful men typically responded to public humiliation. She had expected threats, lawsuits, maybe having security escort her from the building. She hadn't expected an apology that seemed completely sincere. Jonathan walked back to where she stood, his expression softer than she thought possible. "I'm Jonathan Pierce. I don't believe I caught your name." "Camila Rosewood," she managed, still wary of whatever game he might be playing. "Camila, you were right about me. I was having a terrible morning and I took it out on someone who didn't deserve it. That's not the kind of person I want to be." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "I run a company that develops technology to help people communicate better. I could use someone on my team who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm communicating poorly." Camila blinked rapidly, certain she had misheard. "Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity. My company needs a creative director for our public outreach programs, someone who understands how to connect with people authentically." His smile was tentative, vulnerable in a way that transformed his entire face. "Interested in telling me how to be a better human being for a living?" The rational part of Camila's brain screamed warnings about trusting someone she had just publicly insulted. But the desperate part, the part that worried about rent and groceries and her sister's medical bills, whispered that this might be the miracle she had been praying for. "I'll think about it," she said carefully. Jonathan nodded, reaching into his jacket to pull out a business card. "My assistant Benjamin will call you this afternoon to discuss details." "Thank you for the reminder about basic human decency, Camila. I apparently needed it more than I realized." As he left the cafe, Camila stared at the elegant card in her hand. Pierce Innovations, creative director position, a phone number that could change her entire life, round her customers gradually. Return to their conversations. The drama of the morning dissolving into the rhythm of another Manhattan day. Luna appeared at her elbow, eyes wide with disbelief. "Did Jonathan Pierce just offer you a job?" "I think so," Camila murmured, still staring at the card. "Either that or I'm having the strangest nervous breakdown in history." The elderly gentleman approached them, his coffee cup empty, but his smile radiant. "Thank you for standing up for me, dear. That was very brave." "It was just the right thing to do," Camila replied, though her hands were still shaking from adrenaline. "Sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing," said with the wisdom of someone who had lived through many difficult choices. "But it's also how we become the people we're meant to be." As Camila watched him leave, she wondered if she had just experienced a moment that would define the rest of her life. The business card felt heavier than such a small piece of paper had any right to feel weighted with possibilities she couldn't yet imagine. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Grace. "Rent due in 3 days. How are we looking?" Camila looked at the card again, then at Luna's expectant face. Then at the cafe where she had been serving overpriced coffee to people who barely acknowledged her existence. Sometimes life forced you to choose between pride and practicality. Sometimes taking a leap of faith was the only way forward. I think, she said slowly, I'm about to find out if fairy tales can happen in Manhattan. Coffee shops. Luna grinned, squeezing her best friend's arm. Only one way to find out. As the morning rush continued around them, Camila Rosewood held a business card that might represent either the biggest opportunity or the biggest mistake of her life. But for the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Existed. Hope. 3 days later, Camila stood outside the gleaming glass tower that housed Pierce Innovations. Clutching a portfolio of her design work and fighting the urge to turn around and run back to the safety of coffee shop mediocrity. The building stretched toward the sky like a monument to ambition, its reflective surface making her feel small and out of place in her best interview outfit. Benjamin Torres met her in the lobby with a warm smile that immediately put her at ease. He was younger than she had expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and an energy that suggested he genuinely enjoyed his work. Unlike the cold efficiency she had anticipated from a billionaire's assistant, Benjamin radiated the sort of friendliness that made strangers feel welcome. Ms. Rosewood, welcome to Pierce Innovations, he said, extending his hand. Jonathan is finishing up a conference call with our Tokyo office, but he asked me to give you the full tour while we wait. The elevator ride to the 40th floor revealed glimpses of the empire Jonathan had built. Through glass walls, Camila saw teams of developers hunched over multiple monitors, their faces illuminated by lines of code that might as well have been hieroglyphics to her. Marketing specialists clustered around whiteboards covered in campaign strategies, while product designers manipulated three-dimensional holograms with gestures that looked like magic. We develop communication technologies, Benjamin explained. As they walked through corridors lined with awards and patents, apps that help people with speech disabilities communicate more effectively, translation software that preserves cultural nuances, platforms that connect isolated elderly people with volunteer companions. Camila paused at a display showcasing the company's humanitarian projects. Photos showed children in rural schools using tablet computers, elderly people video chatting with distant family members, people with disabilities participating in virtual reality experiences designed specifically for their needs. This wasn't the profit-driven corporation she had expected. Jonathan started the company after his younger brother died. Benjamin continued quietly. Thomas had autism and struggled with traditional communication methods. Jonathan developed the first app to help Thomas express himself more easily. After Thomas passed away in a car accident, Jonathan dedicated his life to creating technology that helps people connect with each other. The revelation hit Camila like a physical blow. She had assumed Jonathan's wealth came from the typical tech entrepreneur path of developing some addictive social media platform or invasive advertising algorithm. Learning that his success grew from personal tragedy and a desire to help others completely shifted her understanding of who he might actually be. Benjamin led her to a spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of Manhattan. Jonathan stood with his back to them, speaking rapidly into a wireless headset in what sounded like fluent Japanese. When he turned around, his face lit up with genuine pleasure at seeing Camila. Ms. Rosewood, thank you for coming, he said after ending his call. I hope Benjamin has been showing you around properly. He's been very informative, Camila replied, still processing everything she had learned about the company's mission. This place is nothing like what I expected. What did you expect? Jonathan asked, with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Honestly, a typical tech company focused on making money by exploiting people's data or attention spans. Camille decided honesty had worked well for her so far. I didn't expect to find a place that actually tries to help people. Jonathan's smile was soft, almost vulnerable. Profit is important for sustainability, but it's not the purpose. The purpose is making sure people can connect with each other regardless of their circumstances or limitations. He gestured for her to sit in one of the comfortable chairs arranged near the windows. Benjamin placed a cup of coffee on the table beside her, prepared exactly the way she liked it from the cafe. The attention to detail surprised her until she realized they had probably observed her preferences during her shifts. Tell me about your design background, Jonathan said, settling into the chair across from her. Camila opened her portfolio with, hands that trembled slightly from nerves. I graduated from Brooklyn Community College with a degree in graphic design. Most of my professional experience has been freelance work for small businesses, local nonprofits, things like that. Nothing. On the scale of what you do here, Jonathan studied her work carefully, asking thoughtful questions about her design choices and creative process. He spent extra time examining a series of posters she had created for a literacy program at her sister's school, noting how she had used visual storytelling to make reading appealing to reluctant students. "These are remarkable," he said, holding up a design that featured children of different ethnicities sharing books under a tree made of words. "You understand how to communicate emotion through visual elements." Oh, that's exactly what we need for our community outreach programs. Community outreach, Camila asked. "We're launching an initiative to bring our communication technologies to underserved communities," Jonathan explained. "Schools that can't afford latest equipment, senior centers where people feel isolated, community centers that serve people with disabilities. We need someone who can create materials that make these technologies feel accessible and welcoming rather than intimidating." The more he talked about the project, the more animated Jonathan became. His usual controlled demeanor gave way to genuine passion as he described plans to distribute tablets loaded with communication apps to children with speech delays. Virtual reality headsets that would allow housebound seniors to visit distant places, and software that would help recent immigrants practice English conversation with patient AI tutors. "The challenge," he continued, "is that many people in these communities have had negative experiences with technology. They've been promised solutions that didn't work or were too complicated to use. We need to rebuild trust through authentic communication and genuine care." Camila found herself leaning forward, caught up in his vision. "You'd want me to design all the promotional materials? The user interfaces? Everything. Posters, brochures, app interfaces, website design, training materials for volunteers?" Jonathan's eyes met hers directly. "I want you to help us show people that technology can be a bridge instead of a barrier." "This is incredible," Camila said, her voice soft with wonder. "I never imagined work could feel this meaningful." "Most people don't think of me as someone who cares about meaning," Jonathan replied with a wry smile. "They see the suits and the money and assume I'm motivated purely by profit." "Can I ask you something personal?" Camila hesitated, then forged ahead. "That morning at the cafe, when I called you heartless, you could have destroyed me. Fired, sued me, anything. Instead, you apologized and offered me a job. That's not normal billionaire behavior." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city below. "My brother Thomas used to say that anger is just sadness wearing a disguise. When you confronted me that morning, I realized how much anger I carry around every day. Anger at Thomas for dying. Anger at myself for not being able to save him. Anger at a world that makes it so hard for people to understand each other." He turned back to face her, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. "You were right. To call me heartless? I had forgotten that other people's pain matters as much as my own. Thomas would have been ashamed of how I treated that elderly gentleman." Camila felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared grief and purpose that went deeper than professional interest. How old was Thomas when he died? 19. He was just starting college, finally comfortable using the communication app we had developed together. He was excited about making friends, about having a normal social life. Jonathan's voice cracked slightly. A drunk driver ran a red light. Thomas died instantly. "I'm so sorry," Camila said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "The worst part is that I almost let his death turn me into exactly the kind of person he would have hated. Closed off, bitter, treating other people like obstacles instead of human beings." Jonathan met her eyes again. "Thank you for reminding me who I'm supposed to be." The weight of that confession hung between them, creating an intimacy that felt both dangerous and inevitable. Camila realized she was seeing the real Jonathan Pierce. The grieving brother underneath the successful businessman, the lonely man behind the intimidating reputation. "So," Jonathan said, his voice lighter now, "are you interested in helping me honor Thomas's memory by making the world a little more connected?" "Yes," Camila said, without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." Benjamin appeared in the doorway as if summoned. By some invisible signal, Ms. Rosewood. Should I prepare the employment paperwork? Please, Jonathan said, standing and extending his hand to Camila. Welcome to Pierce Innovations, creative director. As Camila shook his hand, she felt the same electric jolt she had experienced at the cafe, but this time it came with recognition rather than shock. She was being offered more than a job. She was being invited into a mission that mattered, working alongside someone whose depths she was only beginning to discover. There's one more thing, Jonathan said as Benjamin left to handle the paperwork. The position comes with a substantial salary increase and full benefits, but I want you to know that's not charity. You'll earn every penny. This project is important to me personally, and I need someone I can trust to get it right. Trust, Camila repeated. That's not something you give easily, is it? No, Jonathan admitted. Something tells me you're worth the risk. As Camila looked out at the Manhattan skyline from her new office, she wondered if she was making the smartest decision of her life or the most dangerous. Working closely with Jonathan Pierce would mean constant proximity to someone who had already begun to occupy far too much space in her thoughts. But as she thought about Thomas, about elderly people isolated in their apartments, about children struggling to find their voices, she knew she couldn't walk away from the chance to be part of something that mattered, even if it meant risking her heart in the process. When? Do I start? She asked. Jonathan's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. How about right now, 6 weeks into her new position? Camila had revolutionized Pierce Innovations' community outreach program and completely lost her heart to her enigmatic boss. The realization hit her one evening as she watched Jonathan patiently explain tablet functions to a group of seniors at the Washington Heights Community Center, its usual corporate mask replaced by genuine warmth and infinite patience. Mr. Pierce called out Mrs. Rodriguez, an 80-year-old grandmother whose grandchildren lived in Puerto Rico. How do I make the letters bigger? These old eyes aren't what they used to be. Jonathan knelt beside her chair, his expensive suit forgotten as he gently guided her fingers across the screen. It's like this, Mrs. Rodriguez, and remember, you can always ask the device to read messages aloud if the text is still too small. Camila's heart clenched as she watched him demonstrate the voice-to-text feature that would allow Mrs. Rodriguez to send audio messages to her family. This was the Jonathan Pierce the world never saw. The man who had built a technology empire, not for personal glory, but to honor his brother's memory by helping others communicate and connect. Camila, he called softly, could you help Mrs. Chen? With the video calling set up, the easy way he said her name, like it belonged in his mouth, sent warmth spiraling through her chest. They had developed a comfortable working rhythm over the past month and a half, finishing each other's sentences during meetings and staying late to perfect campaign materials that could genuinely change lives. Of course, she replied, moving. To assist Mrs. Chen with connecting to her daughter in California, the community center buzzed with excited conversation as 30 seniors explored their new tablets, marveling at the ability to see and speak with distant family members in real time. Camila's marketing materials had worked perfectly, presenting the technology as a bridge to loved ones rather than a confusing obstacle to overcome. This is incredible, whispered Grace Rosewood, who had arrived to help with the event. Camila's sister taught at a nearby elementary school and had been amazed by the transformation in her younger sister's life and career. Look how happy they are. Jonathan insisted we focus on joy rather than features, Camila replied, watching him help. Mr. Patterson navigate a photo-sharing app. He said Thomas always reminded him that technology should feel like magic, not work. Grace studied her sister's face with the perceptive eyes of someone who had known her entire life. You're in love with him. The words hit Camila like a physical blow, mainly because they were absolutely true. It's complicated. Love usually is, Grace said gently, but that doesn't make it wrong. Before Camila could respond, Benjamin Torres appeared at her elbow with an expression of barely controlled panic. Camila, we have a problem. Robert Pierce just arrived and he's demanding to speak with Jonathan immediately. Emila's stomach dropped. Jonathan's father was legendary in business circles for his ruthless approach to corporate success and his disapproval of what he called his son's sentimental charity work. She had never met the man, but Jonathan's rare mentions of him were always tinged with tension and old pain. Where is he? She asked. Conference room B. He brought 3 lawyers and someone from the board of directors. Benjamin's worry was evident. This doesn't look good. Camila found Jonathan in the hallway outside the conference room, staring at the closed door like it might contain a firing squad. His usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the posture of a little boy about to be scolded for disappointing his father. "Hey," she said softly, placing her hand on his arm. "What's going on?" "My father wants to shut down the community outreach program," Jonathan said without looking at her. "He says it's a waste of company resources that could be better invested in profitable ventures. He's threatening to call an emergency board meeting to vote me out as CEO if I don't comply." "He can do that?" Camila felt cold dread settling in her stomach. "He still holds 30% of company shares and has allies on the board. If he can convince them that I'm prioritizing sentiment over shareholder value, they could remove me from leadership." Jonathan finally met her eyes, and she saw fear there. "Camila, if that happens, everything we've built gets dismantled. The programs, the apps, all of it. And we don't let it happen," Camila said, with more conviction than she felt. Jonathan's smile was sad. "My father will make sure you're fired along with me. He doesn't believe in keeping witnesses to what he calls family failures." "I don't care," Camila said, surprising herself with the vehemence of her response. "This program matters. Thomas's legacy matters. You matter." Something shifted in Jonathan's expression as the last words hung between them. "Camila, I know this is probably the worst possible timing," she said quickly, before her courage could desert her, "but I need you to know that this isn't just about work anymore. What we've built together, the way you make me feel, the way you see the world. I'm falling in love with you, Jonathan, and I'm not going to let your father destroy what we've created." Jonathan stared at her for a moment that felt like eternity. Then he cupped her face in his hands with infinite gentleness. "I fell in love with you the moment you called me heartless in that cafe. You're absolutely right, and you were exactly what I needed to find my heart again." Their first kiss was soft and desperate, tasting of hope and fear in equal measure. When they broke apart, Jonathan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "But Camila, I can't ask you to risk your future for this fight." "You're not asking," she replied firmly. "I'm choosing. Now let's go face your father and show him what real strength looks like." The conference room felt like a courtroom as they entered together. Robert Pierce sat at the head of the table like a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence, flanked by lawyers whose expressions suggested they had come prepared for corporate warfare. Steel gray hair and cold eyes made him look like an older, harder version of Jonathan. "Jonathan," Robert said without preamble, "I've reviewed the financial reports for your little charity project. You've spent $12 million on what amounts to expensive toys for people who can't afford to buy your actual products. That's $12 million that should have gone to shareholders. That $12 million has generated $43 million in positive media coverage and established relationships with community leaders in 12 major cities." Camila interjected before Jonathan could respond. "We've also received preliminary interest from 3 major foundations willing to fund expansion of the program." Robert's gaze shifted to her with the kind of dismissive assessment she recognized from her cafe days. "And you are?" "Creative Director for Community Outreach," she replied, meeting his stare without flinching. "And the person who designed the marketing strategy that turned your son's vision into a sustainable business model." "Business model?" Robert laughed harshly. "Giving away technology to people who can't pay for it isn't a business model. It's charity, and charity doesn't belong in corporate boardrooms." "Actually," said a voice from the doorway, "charity that builds brand loyalty and opens new market segments is exactly what belongs in corporate boardrooms." Everyone turned to see Margaret Chen, the board's senior independent director, entering with a tablet in her hands. She was followed by Mrs. Rodriguez from the community center, whose granddaughter appeared on the tablet screen via video call. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Margaret continued, "would you mind telling Mr. Pierce about your experience with Pierce Innovations technology today?" "Oh my," Mrs. Rodriguez said, looking nervous but determined. "Well, I got to see my granddaughter Sophia for the first time in 2 years. She's been saving money to visit, but with her new baby and her husband's job situation, the travel costs were just too much." Sophia's voice came through the tablet speaker with crystal clarity. "Abuela, show them how we can read together now." Mrs. Rodriguez beamed as she demonstrated the reading app that allowed her to share virtual story time with her granddaughter across the country. "Sophia is learning to read in English, and now I can help her practice every day. This little machine brought my family back together." Robert Pierce's expression hadn't changed, but Camilla noticed his hands had clenched into fists. "That's very touching, but emotional stories don't pay dividends." "No," Margaret agreed, "but the documentary rights do. Netflix has offered us $25 million for exclusive rights to film our community programs. The mayor's office has requested a meeting about expanding to all city senior centers. And Governor Williams wants to discuss a statewide implementation that would be funded through federal grants." She placed a thick folder on the table. "Jonathan, your charity work has positioned Pierce Innovations as the leader in humanitarian technology applications. Our stock price has risen 38% since the program launched, and we're fielding acquisition offers from companies that want our community engagement expertise." Jonathan looked stunned. "Margaret, I had no idea you were tracking these developments." "I've been watching your work very carefully," Margaret replied with a slight smile. "Thomas would be proud of what you've built in his memory." The mention of his deceased grandson caused the first crack in Robert Pierce's armor. For just a moment, pain flickered across his features before the cold mask slammed back into place. "Thomas was a dreamer," Robert said stiffly. "Build sustainable businesses." "Dreams built this entire company," Jonathan replied, finding his voice at last. "Thomas dreamed of a world where everyone could communicate effectively. I built the technology to make that dream real." Damned Camilla. "Helped me find a way to share that dream with people who need it most." He stood up, moving to place his hand on Camilla's shoulder. "I'm not shutting down the community outreach program, Dad. I'm expanding it. With or without your approval." "Then you're fired," Robert snapped. "I'll call an emergency board meeting and have you removed as CEO within the week." "Actually," Margaret interjected calmly, "you won't. The board met this morning for an emergency session of our own. By a unanimous vote, we've restructured Jonathan's position to include guaranteed protection for the humanitarian programs. Any attempt to remove him or alter these programs requires a 75% majority vote, which you cannot achieve." Robert Pierce went very still, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and finally resignation. "You've been planning this? We've been watching a young CEO transform a successful company into an industry leader while honoring his family's legacy," Margaret said firmly. "That's exactly the kind of leadership we want to protect." "And," added Mrs. Rodriguez from the tablet screen, "my granddaughter wants to study computer science now because she met the nice man who makes the talking machines. Her teacher says companies need more Latino engineers." The room fell silent as the implications of her words settled over everyone present. This wasn't just about charitable giving or corporate social responsibility. It was about inspiring the next generation of innovators, building bridges between communities, and proving that business success didn't require abandoning human compassion. Robert Pierce looked at his son for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded once, sharply. "It seems I've been outvoted and outmaneuvered. Congratulations, Jonathan. You've built something your grandfather would have recognized." The unexpected reference to Jonathan's grandfather, who had apparently been more supportive of dreams than Robert himself, brought tears to Jonathan's eyes. "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know." As the lawyers packed up their briefcases and board members filed out, Robert Pierce paused at the door. "Ms. Rosewood," he said quietly, "take care of my son. He's more like his grandfather than either of us realized." And they were finally alone. Jonathan pulled Camilla into his arms with the desperate relief of someone who had expected to lose everything and found himself holding on to what mattered most. "We did it," he whispered against her hair. "We actually did it." "We're just getting started," Camilla replied, thinking of all the communities they could serve, all the lives they could touch, all the dreams they could help make real. 6 months later, Pierce Innovations' community outreach program had expanded to 50 cities across the country. Camilla's marketing campaigns had won 3 international awards for social impact advertising, and she had been featured on the cover of Fast Company as the creative director, changing how tech companies connect with communities. But her favorite achievement was much smaller and more personal. She stood in the same Washington Heights Community Center where it had all begun, watching Jonathan teach Mrs. Rodriguez's 8-year-old great-granddaughter how to use a coding app designed specifically for children. "Look, Mr. Jonathan," little Sophia called out, her tablet displaying a simple animation she had created. I made the butterfly dance. That's beautiful, Sophia, Jonathan said, his smile radiant with genuine joy. You're going to be an amazing programmer someday. Camila felt Grace's elbow in her ribs. When are you going to put that man out of his misery and marry him? Actually, Camila said, pulling a small velvet box from her pocket, I was thinking, tonight might be a good time to propose. Grace's eyes went wide. You're going to propose to him? Thomas always told Jonathan that the best communication happens when you speak from the heart, Camila replied, watching the man she loved help a child discover her potential. I think it's time I took that advice. As the community center filled with the laughter of children and the excited chatter of seniors discovering new ways to connect with their families, Camila Rosewood prepared to ask Jonathan Pierce to spend the rest of his life building bridges between hearts. She had a feeling he would say yes. After all, it had already proven that the most powerful technology in the world was simply two people choosing to see the best in each other. Everything else was just details.